We have a very interesting match here between Oyakhilome David versus Okpongete Eddidiong. Now, this game was played at the National Sports Festival 2024 edition at Ogun State. Now, the game features the Colle System on the board. You can see both pieces coming out, and now the bishop captures and the queen captures, and now the pawn comes to e6. Now, both sides are trying to develop their pieces as fast as possible. And now white strikes the center with pawn to e4, and now we have a series of captures and black castles. So now the engine says it's a point black draw, as there is no significant advantage here, but I trust that both sides have their fighting chances, as we will see the aggressive spirit happening on the board. Now queen to d4 is played, where the queen and the knight attacks the knight, and white decides to exchange the knight and the bishop comes out. Now the queen comes to e2, preventing the move pawn to e5. But the rook engine suggests activating the rook likewise to d8. This is such a good move, and it's a game. Is a battle of some of the Nigerian's finest players, and he finds the move, and now he decides to strike in the center. Pawn captures, knight captures. Now will he go for the simple knight captures knight, or will he develop his bishop? Now knight takes and then the rook takes. Now we have the move queen to g4, although the move bishop to e3 was better. And now the second rook sweeps into the game, and the bishop comes in now to a more active square, attacking the a pawn, and now the rook attacks the queen instead. And then the best move for according to the engine, is to play the move rook a d1, activating the rook along this diagonal and counter attacking the queen. But he decides to come back with the move queen to d1, trying to play more securely and then more solid with the game. So I don't think that black is going to go for this exchange, because he has to he had leave his fighting chances on the board, and plays the move queen to c6. Now both sides are really trying to find a way to grind out this game, as they both need a win in order to advance into the qualifier section. So this move queen to f3 is played, pinning the rook towards the queen, and white decides to activate spawn with the move pawn to h6. Now the other rook comes into the game, although the bishop takes pawn would have been much better. Now black decides to safeguard his pawn, but stands at the risk of losing his queen if the rook moves to a careless square such as this. But he decides to bring his rook now to double his rooks along open fire, although the move bishop to e4, e5 was better. Now the rook comes trying to ask for exchange, but he misses it, and now the queens are exchanged off the board. But now the only thing about this position now is that white has double pawns and multiple pawn weaknesses to play for, and it's something that white needs to have more solidity in maintaining the equality here. So he decides to go for rook exchange, and black cuts him off, and then the first pair of rooks are falling down. Now the best thing according to the engine is to play the move king to g2 to try and activate the king, possibly push the f pawn, and try to play solidly, have a solid position. You can see the level of focus here on both sides, and he decides to play the move king to g2, and now the move pawn to f5 was played. The best move now is the move pawn to f4. Creating equality along the center, and something that white needs to find in order to maintain equality. The only move that is very important in maintaining equality, but because pawn to f4, the idea of this move now is stopping the ideas for white to play the pawn to g4 or anything, and he has to level of focus here on the board. He tries to support the move, and he finds the move pawn to f4. Now the idea is safeguarding this pawn. He's now keeping the center equal, and also trying to make sure that his weaknesses are well covered. So yeah, according to Mizovic, it says that a weakness is only a weakness when it can be attacked, and we have to move king to f3. Now bring the king to a more active position, and then according to the endings, rook to b6 is a very good idea here to try and maneuver the rook over to the g file. But he finds the move rook to g8, and now the rook onto h4, a classic move on the board, and now the king decides to come forward. Now, the strong move now, according to the English, play the move onto h5. Will he find it? Yes, he does. He finds the move onto h5. What he does now is he clamps down the king side pawns, and he limits black's winning chance, as now the weaknesses can no longer be attacked. So he decides to trade off this set of pawns. But now the best move now is pawn takes, or he thinks about it, and from the way he reaches out for his rook, and he plays the move rook to g1, pinning the rook to the pawn to the rook. And now I think the best move is for him to capture, and he does play the move, and then our rook captures almost immediately. Now the idea for the engine could be, yes, he finds the move, yes, breaking the rook now from the h file, and it's something that to keep his fighting chances, and he decides to bring his king towards the center to try and see if his king can invade towards the pawns, and he decides to push the pawn forward. And now the best move according to the engine is to play the move pawn to c5, and he finds the move pawn to c5. Such a classic of the board, and it's something that it's limiting both sides as they are maintaining equilibrium in the game. Now the move pawn to b3, possibly to play the move pawn to c4, but he decides to play the move bishop now to f8 to defend the pawn, and then possibly reroute the rook over to the center. And now the rook tries to invade to the center squares. The best move here, according to the engine, is to play the move pawn to h5, but here he decides to just bring the bishop back. The tennis community, as players are doing here. Now he sets up a quick trap for the rook for the king, and the king steps back a bit. So here we can see that both sides are really giving it their best to try and grind this out. The engine says that this is a point draw, and both sides decide to exchange a pair of the last set of rooks on the board. So this looks like a draw simply because the king literally has no competition towards the side, because the dark squares are covered by the bishop. So now we have the king's position, and the bishop comes out back now to try and cut the king off from invading towards his own territory. So it's such a nice move, and a good opportunity to king to g2. It's something that but he decides to play the move pawn to f3. The game is still a draw according to the position of the engine, and both sides are really giving it their best. Now the bishop comes in, infiltrating the king's side, and white needs to be very careful at this point. So he finds the move of bishop to c1. Now the move bishop to c3 is quite a very strong move, cutting off the bishop and then gaining space along this dark space, and he finds it. And now the move bishop to a8, and now check comes in, and the king move. The both players playing at a remarkable speed here. Both players are really giving it their best, and they are trying so hard to represent their state. So according to the engine, this is still a draw because no side has a pathway to infiltrate the other end of the territory. So now the king decides to move forward, and now the move bishop to d3 is played. Now he finds an idea with king to d7. Now what could be this idea? We could possibly maneuver the king over here, and let's see how it goes. It's something that both players will actually try and give their best in. So he looks at the board, tries to find the best idea for the game, reaches out, checks, get any idea for him to play for here, and he plays the move now. Here, bringing the king over to the b7, and then the king comes in. Now the best move here is to play the bishop to f1, to play the bishop to f1 now to try and beat the scope of the bishop, and he misses it. And this is something that has changed the evaluation of the position, because now black has successfully infiltrated the game, and it's going to take serious precision to find it. It has to play the move, the only winning king to a5 on the board. Now why it's so important? Because the king has to find the chance to do it, and he does find the move, and this now is something that he has been able to convert, or like a friend of mine would say, he has been able to magnus the game. So this is something grinding water out of ice, And now this shows why black is winning, because it is now a case of multiple weaknesses. Uh, he is now playing on the principle of two witnesses, trying to now bring the bishop back, and the check comes in on board. The king steps in, and the king cannot step onto this weapon because it's covered by the bishop. So he decides to push again, insisting on his weaknesses and pawn captures and the rest. And now the move pawn comes in again. Now the bishop comes to g3 first, and now the idea is to bring the bishop now there, and he decides to wait, and he reaches out for the bishop and then plays the bishop now to f2. Now the king comes forward and he brings the bishop back. Now the king comes in again, and now we have the bishop now controlling this particular square. So it's up to black. It's up to black now to figure this out as something that requires serious precision. And after the move bishop to d4, it's a completely losing position here for white, because now he has lost the opposition. Any move by white now is going to end him up losing the game. So this is a famous position, or it's a famous setup in chess called Swishensu, where the player, any move the player makes, will create an adverse effect on his position. And it's such a really painful experience having to use such drawn position, but it all shows the quality of how chess can go, how the foundation can be. And he resigns. Thank you so much for watching, and then see you in the next video.